Saturday mornings once carried a kind of magic, a sacred time when cereal bowls overflowed, living rooms turned into theaters, and colorful worlds came alive. But not every show survived memory's embrace. Some were buried beneath bigger franchises, lost to shifting networks, or victims of bad timing. Today, we unlock 20 forgotten Saturday morning cartoons of the 1990s you may never see again. Bot's Master, 1993. At first glance, Bot's Master looked like yet another toy-driven cartoon designed to sell action figures and fuel playground battles, and in many ways, it was. Debuting in 1993, the show centered around Ziv, ZZ, Zoolander, and his army of friendly robots battling the corporate villains of the RM Corp. The premise had flair, but it was overshadowed by the juggernauts of the era, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers. What made Bot's Master distinct was its unusual 3D gimmick called Laser Time. Episodes invited kids to put on special glasses during certain action scenes, turning otherwise flat sequences into a clunky but futuristic viewing experience. On paper, it sounded groundbreaking. In practice, it often left kids dizzy, frustrated, or disappointed. Behind the scenes, the show's production team scrambled to keep pace with technology, yet 3D was still too underdeveloped to work smoothly on standard Saturday morning broadcasts. Ratings dipped, toy sales lagged, and Bot's Master faded after a single season. Today, it lives as a nostalgic relic of 90s excess, a reminder that ambition without execution can bury even the flashiest of ideas. Forgotten, yes, but unforgettable for the kids who squinted through those cheap cardboard glasses. Creepy Crawlers, 1994. If Bot's Master aimed at high-tech gimmicks, Creepy Crawlers slithered into another market, gross-out toys. Based on the wildly popular mold and bake kits where kids created rubber bugs, this 1994 cartoon attempted to give narrative life to the franchise. The story followed Chris, a teenager who accidentally brought his bug creations to life, unleashing creatures that were equal parts allies and monsters. The animation was darker than many Saturday morning shows, with eerie sound design and unsettling character models. But its appeal was limited. Parents worried about the grotesque imagery, and critics dismissed it as another half-baked attempt to stretch a toy line into a television saga. Production was further complicated by censorship concerns. Some networks feared that children might mimic the bug-baking experiments at home in dangerous ways. As a result, episodes were shuffled around schedules or quietly dropped altogether. Though it had potential, Creepy Crawlers ultimately crawled off the air after a short run. Today, it stands as one of the strangest toy-to-cartoon experiments of the decade, more nightmare fuel than nostalgic treasure. Mighty Max, 1993-1994. When Polly Pocket toys were reimagined for boys as miniature, Doom Zones. It was only natural that a cartoon followed. Mighty Max premiered in 1993, telling the tale of Max, an ordinary boy with a magical cap that allowed him to travel through portals and face monstrous villains. Unlike many toy-based shows, Mighty Max boasted surprisingly strong writing. Episodes carried eerie mythology, global adventure, and even moments of genuine tragedy. Max was flanked by two guardians, Norman, the stoic warrior, and Virgil, the wise bird-like mentor. Together, they battled dark overlords across worlds. But its depth was both a blessing and a curse. Parents praised the storytelling, yet younger kids found its darker themes unsettling. Merchandising tie-ins underperformed, and the show was quietly canceled after 2 seasons. Still, Mighty Max lingers in cult memory. Fans recall its surprisingly emotional finale, where Max resets time to undo catastrophe but loses all memory of his journey. It was storytelling rare for Saturday mornings, ambitious, haunting, and tragically short-lived. Street Sharks, 1994, 1997. If Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles proved that mutants could dominate pop culture, Street Sharks tried to sink its teeth into the same formula. Premiering in 1994, the show followed four brothers transformed into half-shark, half-human heroes battling against an evil scientist. Its slogan, "Jawsome," became an instant playground catchphrase. Initially, it worked. Kids loved the outrageous character designs and high-energy action. Toy sales soared, with figures featuring biting jaws and fins that chomped through plastic enemies. But behind the hype, critics slammed the show as a blatant ripoff of Ninja Turtles, lacking originality or depth. As the seasons wore on, writing grew more absurd, introducing bizarre hybrid villains and outlandish storylines that stretched suspension of disbelief. Eventually, the fad burned out. By 1997, Street Sharks disappeared from schedules, relegated to VHS tapes and faded toy boxes. And yet, for a brief window, it perfectly captured the over-the-top energy of 90s kids' culture. Forgotten by networks, but never by the children who once shouted, "Jawsome," in unison, it swims eternally in nostalgia's waters. Biker Mice from Mars, 1993-1996. When Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ruled the early 90s, networks scrambled to replicate its success with anthropomorphic heroes. Enter Biker Mice from Mars, a show that revved onto screens in 1993. Its premise? 3 motorcycle-riding, muscle-bound mice, Throttle, Moto, and Vinny, escaped the destruction of their home planet Mars to defend Earth against greedy corporate aliens. At first, it worked. Kids were hooked on the edgy, leather-clad heroes, their customized motorcycles, and the show's heavy metal aesthetic. The action was fast, loud, and outrageous. Toy tie-ins hit shelves immediately, and for a brief moment, it seemed like Biker Mice from Mars might claw out its own place in Saturday morning glory. But behind the scenes, the series faced stiff competition. By 1994, the market was oversaturated with similar mutant hero shows like Street Sharks and Extreme Dinosaurs. Critics dismissed the mice as just another TMNT knockoff, and audiences gradually shifted their attention elsewhere. The show limped along until 1996, even earning a cult following in Europe, but it never achieved the cultural dominance it desperately wanted. A revival in 2006 tried to rekindle nostalgia, but it fizzled quickly. Today, Biker Mice from Mars remains a relic of 90s cartoon excess, a high-octane attempt at recapturing lightning in a bottle, remembered mostly for its over-the-top action figures and wild theme song. Double Dragon, 1993-1994. In the early 90s, video games were rapidly crossing into Saturday morning television. One such adaptation was Double Dragon, based on the wildly popular beat-em-up arcade franchise. Debuting in 1993, the cartoon followed martial arts brothers Billy and Jimmy Lee as they fought crime in futuristic Metro City, guided by mystical dragon powers. The series tried to mix superhero storytelling with martial arts spectacle, but fans of the games were disappointed. Gone were the gritty back alleys and raw fighting of the source material. Instead, the cartoon adopted a campier, kid-friendly approach, complete with transformation sequences and colorful villains. Behind the curtain, production was plagued with inconsistencies. Animators rushed episodes to keep pace with deadlines, leading to uneven visuals and awkward pacing. The writing leaned heavily on recycled monster of the week plots, a formula already saturating 90s television. Critics slammed the show for straying too far from the source material, and even younger viewers grew restless. Ratings sank quickly, forcing cancellation after just 2 seasons. But despite its flaws, Double Dragon represents an important moment in the era when video games began seriously influencing children's television. It showed both the potential and the pitfalls of turning arcade cabinets into story-driven cartoons. Forgotten today, it still echoes as a cautionary tale of adaptation gone wrong. Extreme Dinosaurs, 1997. If mutant sharks and biker mice weren't enough, by the late 90s, audiences were treated to another outlandish creation, Extreme Dinosaurs. Originally introduced as a spin-off of Street Sharks, this 1997 series featured genetically engineered dinosaurs, T-Bone, Spike, Stegs, and Bullseye, battling evil velociraptors bent on world domination. The show's slogan, "Let's fossilize 'em," never quite caught on like Cowabunga or Jawsome. Still, its bright animation and larger-than-life heroes briefly entertained kids who craved action. Toy companies pushed hard, releasing figures with spiked tails, claw-swinging arms, and fluorescent paint jobs. Yet beneath the flashy exterior, Extreme Dinosaurs struggled to stand out. Its plots were formulaic, villains cartoonishly one-dimensional, and the writing lacked the humor that had made TMNT timeless. Worse, parents began to grow weary of the endless stream of violent, extreme cartoons marketed primarily to sell toys. Only one season aired, and despite a few VHS releases, it quickly faded from the lineup. Unlike the Turtles, who enjoyed longevity through reinvention, Extreme Dinosaurs became extinct almost as quickly as it arrived. And yet, for those who watched, it was pure adrenaline, oversized heroes battling prehistoric evil in a kaleidoscope of explosions. Forgotten by the mainstream, it survives only in the memories of kids who once staged plastic dino duels in their bedrooms. Santo Bugito, 1995-1996. Among the strangest Saturday morning offerings of the 90s was Santo Bugito, created by animation pioneer Arlene Klasky of Rugrats fame. Airing in 1995, it billed itself as the first insect sitcom set in a fictional Tex-Mex border town populated entirely by bugs. The show centered on Carmen and Paco, ant proprietors of a local restaurant, whose customers included an eccentric cast of beetles, flies, and caterpillars. While the concept was original, it baffled audiences. Mixing Mexican cultural references with insect slapstick proved a tough sell to young viewers used to straightforward action heroes. Behind the scenes, Klasky envisioned Santo Bugito as a family-friendly satire that also introduced multicultural themes. But CBS executives pushed for broader humor, resulting in a show that struggled to balance quirky wit with marketable storytelling. Critics praised its unique premise, yet ratings floundered. Without toy tie-ins or mainstream appeal, the series ended after a single season. Today, it is remembered less for its narrative and more for its sheer oddity, a bizarre experiment that dared to be different but ultimately fell between the cracks. For those who caught it, Santo Bugito remains a surreal flashback to a time when networks still gambled on originality, even if it meant confusing half their audience. The Savage Dragon, 1995-1996. When Image Comics exploded onto the scene in the early 90s, one of its most popular titles was Eric Larson's Savage Dragon, a gritty superhero tale about a green-skinned, mohawked police officer battling crime in Chicago. In 1995, USA Network attempted to bring that edgy comic energy to Saturday mornings with an animated series. But almost immediately, the concept clashed with the restrictions of children's programming. The comic was violent, profane, and filled with mature themes. The cartoon, however, was forced into sanitized territory, with watered-down villains and kid-friendly storylines. Fans of the original series were disappointed, while younger viewers unfamiliar with the source material found the show confusing. Behind the scenes, animators struggled to adapt Larson's chaotic art style for television budgets, resulting in uneven animation and recycled frames. Ratings failed to climb, and toy companies showed little interest in backing a property that straddled such an awkward middle ground. The series ended after just 26 episodes, a faint shadow of its source. Today, the Savage Dragon cartoon is mostly remembered by comic book fans as an ambitious but doomed attempt to translate adult material into Saturday morning fare. It stands as a cautionary reminder that not every cult comic can survive the network censors. Project Geeker, 1996-1997. Few 90s cartoons match the strangeness of Project Geeker, which aired briefly on CBS in 1996. Created by television writer Doug Tennippel, later known for Earthworm Jim, the show followed Geeker, a shape-shifting, bioengineered creature who could transform into bizarre objects but never control his powers properly. With its offbeat humor, surreal visuals, and sci-fi overtones, Project Geeker seemed ahead of its time. Critics even compared its tone to early Adult Swim programming years before that block existed. But mainstream audiences, particularly children, struggled to grasp its absurdity. Many jokes were meta, self-referential, or built on parody, which flew over the heads of its target demographic. Behind the curtain, CBS executives were unsure how to market the series. Without toys or merchandise to boost its longevity, it was quickly abandoned. Only 13 episodes aired before cancellation, and yet those who watched it never forgot it. With its manic energy and eccentric cast, Project Geeker carved out a cult following long after its disappearance. Forgotten by the masses, it survives as one of the strangest gems of Saturday mornings, a misfit show that refused to play by the rules. Skeleton Warriors, 1994 to 1995. In 1994, CBS attempted to capture the darker side of the superhero craze with Skeleton Warriors, a gothic fantasy about an evil overlord named Baron Dark who could transform people into living skeletons. His skeletal army clashed against the Noble Legion of Light, a team of armored heroes trying to defend their futuristic kingdom. The show's dark, metallic aesthetic stood out in a landscape dominated by colorful, wisecracking heroes. Toymakers' Playmates jumped in with an action figure line featuring glow-in-the-dark bones and intimidating designs. But while the toys were inventive, the show itself failed to attract steady viewers. One major issue was tone. It was too frightening for younger children, yet too simplistic for older audiences seeking depth. Episodes leaned heavily on exposition, and the writing often felt more like an extended commercial than compelling drama. After just 13 episodes, Skeleton Warriors was pulled from the schedule. Though its toy line lived on briefly, the show itself sank into obscurity. Today, it's remembered mostly by collectors for its visually striking but narratively hollow designs, proof that not even the scariest villains could save a show with no beating heart. Widget, 1990-1991, syndicated into mid-90s. Before environmental themes became mainstream in children's programming, there was Widget, a purple alien dedicated to protecting Earth from ecological disasters. Debuting in 1990, the show remained in syndication into the mid-90s, often playing alongside bigger hits like Captain Planet. Widget could shapeshift into different forms, usually to stop polluters, poachers, or alien invaders threatening the planet. The message was earnest, but critics found the delivery heavy-handed. The animation was stiff, and the villains so one-dimensional that the lessons often felt more like lectures than stories. Behind the scenes, environmental groups actually supported the show, praising its educational slant. But without major network backing or compelling writing, Widget never gained the traction of its eco-warrior cousin, Captain Planet. By the mid-90s, it had all but vanished from airwaves, remembered only by kids who woke up early enough to catch it in syndication. For all its flaws, Widget was a noble attempt to inspire children to care for the Earth. Its legacy lies not in action figures or catchphrases, but in planting the seeds of environmental awareness in the minds of young viewers. The Hurricanes, 1993-1997. If football could inspire Arthurian knights, why not soccer heroes? That was the thinking behind The Hurricanes, a syndicated cartoon that ran from 1993 to 1997. It followed a fictional international soccer team battling both on and off the field, not just against rival teams, but also against villains trying to sabotage them. With soccer gaining popularity worldwide, producers hoped the Hurricanes would ride that wave. The animation was colorful and the characters diverse, representing different nationalities. But while international audiences warmed to it, American kids, who hadn't yet embraced soccer on a cultural scale, found it hard to connect. Behind the scenes, the series struggled with shifting broadcast schedules. In the U.S., it often aired in awkward slots, buried under bigger names like Batman, the animated series, or X-Men. Without strong toy or video game tie-ins, it lacked staying power. Yet the show holds nostalgic value, especially for fans outside America. It reflected a rare moment when Saturday morning cartoons dared to embrace global culture rather than purely American tropes. Forgotten domestically, it stands today as a curious relic of an international sport trying to break through American airwaves. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, 1993. Based on Mark Schultz's cult comic Xenozoic Tales, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs burst onto CBS in 1993 with an irresistible premise: a post-apocalyptic future where humanity coexists with resurrected dinosaurs, and the heroes drive massive Cadillacs through this dangerous world. The mix of retro cars, prehistoric beasts, and environmental themes had everything needed for success. The animation was dynamic, with slick car chases and epic dinosaur battles. But there was a problem. The source material was dark, satirical, and targeted at older readers. To fit Saturday morning standards, the cartoon was toned down, losing much of its bite. The environmental messages, though admirable, often came across as preachy. Behind the curtain, toy lines failed to launch as expected, and CBS quickly pulled the plug after just 13 episodes. The show's cult following remained, especially among fans of Schultz's original comics, but mainstream audiences moved on. Today, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs is remembered as one of the boldest flops of the 90s, a show that dared to combine hot rods and dinosaurs but couldn't survive the compromises of network television. Forgotten by most, it still roars in the memory of those who loved its brief, glorious run. Fish Police, 1992. One of the oddest experiments of the 90s was Fish Police, adapted from a darker comic book series of the same name. Debuting in 1992, the show transplanted a detective noir setting underwater, with anthropomorphic fish playing cops, mobsters, and femme fatales. Think Dick Tracy with scales and fins. The voice cast was impressive, featuring John Ritter, Tim Curry, and Ed Asner. But the show's tone baffled audiences. The original comic was edgy, laced with innuendo and adult humor. For Saturday mornings, that content had to be scrubbed, leaving a strange hybrid, too weird and sophisticated for kids, too watered down for adults. Behind the scenes, animators struggled to capture the comic's gritty aesthetic on a children's network budget. Viewership never gained traction, and CBS canceled it after only a handful of episodes. Yet, for its sheer audacity, Fish Police remains a fascinating artifact. It represents the 90s willingness to gamble on bizarre ideas, even if they were destined to sink. Forgotten by almost everyone, it still surfaces occasionally as an example of how not every comic book needs a Saturday morning adaptation. Gargoyles, The Goliath Chronicles, 1996-1997. The original Gargoyles, 1994-1996, became a Disney cult classic, celebrated for its gothic tone and serialized storytelling. But when ABC took over for the final season, retitled The Goliath Chronicles, the magic unraveled. The network, wary of the show's darker themes, pushed for lighter, more kid-friendly plots. Writers left, creative tensions escalated, and the animation quality noticeably dipped. Fans who had grown attached to the rich mythology and Shakespearean undertones of the original felt betrayed. Ratings plummeted. Behind the scenes, even voice actors expressed disappointment, noting how the new direction gutted the soul of the show. After just 13 episodes, The Goliath Chronicles was canceled, leaving fans to regard it as a poor epilogue to an otherwise legendary series. Today, it remains largely forgotten, overshadowed by the brilliance of the first 2 seasons. For devoted fans, The Goliath Chronicles is a reminder of how network meddling can tarnish even the most promising of animated sagas. Camp Candy, 1990 shot to 1992, syndicated through mid-90s. Few remember that beloved comedian John Candy once had his own Saturday morning cartoon. Camp Candy placed the actor as the voice of a fictionalized version of himself, running a summer camp full of zany adventures. Launched in 1990, the show captured Candy's warmth and humor, giving kids a light-hearted series about friendship, outdoor fun, and the occasional absurd mishap. For a while, it worked. Children adored the silly energy, and parents appreciated its wholesome tone. But when John Candy tragically passed away in 1994, reruns of Camp Candy quickly faded from circulation. Without its star to anchor publicity or breathe life into the character, networks quietly shelved it. Behind the scenes, animators later admitted how much the series leaned on Candy's charisma. Without him, it lacked the spark needed to survive. Today, Camp Candy lives as a bittersweet memory, both a celebration of a comedic icon and a casualty of his untimely death. SWAT Kats, The Radical Squadron, 1993-1995. At number 1 sits a fan favorite that vanished too soon, SWAT Kats, The Radical Squadron. Premiering in 1993, the show followed 2 vigilante fighter pilots, T-Bone and Razor, who flew a high-tech jet to protect Mega Cat City from villains and monsters. Unlike many cartoons of its time, SWAT Kats was unapologetically intense. Its action sequences were cinematic, its villains menacing, and its tone darker than most Saturday fare. Kids adored it, making it one of the highest-rated syndicated cartoons of its era. But network executives grew nervous. Parent groups complained it was too violent, and Hanna-Barbera's leadership worried it didn't align with the studio's family-friendly brand. Despite its popularity, funding was slashed mid-production. An ambitious 3rd season was scripted, but never produced. Behind the curtain, creators lamented how close they came to expanding the show's mythology. Fans still petition for its revival decades later. SWAT Kats wasn't forgotten because it failed. It was forgotten because it scared the wrong people at the wrong time. For those who remember, it remains one of the greatest what-could-have-been stories in cartoon history. Saturday mornings in the 90s gave us bold experiments, toy-fueled flops, and hidden gems that flickered out too soon. These forgotten cartoons remind us that even failures shape nostalgia's tapestry. Which of these do you remember? Drop your favorites below, like this video, and subscribe for more hidden treasures of pop culture.